They locked me away, thinking I would forget they say I forget things, that my memory comes and goes, that sometimes I can't even recognize my own daughter. That's what they tell the nurses here. That's what they write in my file. Early stages of senile dementia. Patient often confused, loses track of time. But what they don't know, what no one here knows, is that I remember everything. I remember the way my son avoided my eyes the morning they brought me here. I remember the hesitation in my daughter-in-law's voice when she said, "It's just for a while, Dad, until things settle down." I remember the smell of my house as I saw it for the last time through the rear window, freshly cleaned like they were preparing it for someone else. They say I forget, but I remember the moment they decided I was an inconvenience. It was right after my wife died. The house got too quiet. The bills piled up. I needed help. Yes, but not this. Not to be locked away in a building where the walls are gray and the clocks are meaningless. They smile when they visit. Once a month, always on a Sunday, never longer than 25 minutes. They bring me cookies I don't eat. Ask me if I remember their kids' names. Laugh awkwardly when I don't answer. I let them think I'm fading. It makes them feel better. It keeps their guilt manageable. But I remember. I remember the documents they asked me to sign. Something about simplifying the will. They rushed me, told me not to worry, said they'd take care of everything. I remember the fine print, the way my name was shifted from owner to former. I remember the day my bank account disappeared. They said it was for safety, said I was getting forgetful with numbers. But I remember every withdrawal, every transfer, every lie. They say I don't remember birthdays, but I do. I remember the day my grandson turned 6 and wasn't allowed to visit me. I remember the cake I baked for him, left untouched on my nightstand. I remember how no one ever came to get it. They think I'm too old to fight, too slow to matter, too senile to notice. But the truth is, I've been watching them, documenting, detailing, piecing together every thread they tried to unravel. I have a notebook, hidden beneath the drawer where they think I keep candy. Inside, dates, conversations, signatures, photocopies of documents they thought I shredded, and one line circled in red ink. They think I forgot, but I was just waiting. You see, they made one mistake. They put me in a place full of people they assumed couldn't speak for themselves. But here, I am not alone. Mrs. Halford in room 6. Her son took her house and forged her pension. Mr. Alton in room 3. His niece changed his medication because he knew too much. We are not senile. We are silent because no one listens when they think you're fading. But we remember, and someday they'll wish we didn't. The notebook they never found, they thought the drawer next to my bed was just for socks. Wool, folded, a little worn, and candy, sugar-free mints for appearances. But beneath the fabric, beneath the harmless little life I let them believe I was living, lay a notebook. Small, black leather cover, no title, no label, only time. Time and truth. I started writing in it the night they first left me here. My son and daughter-in-law walked away too quickly, not looking back once. The staff said, "You'll settle in soon, Mr. Lawrence." I nodded. But that night, when the hallways grew quiet and the light outside my window dimmed to a soft gray, I opened that notebook and wrote the first line. They think I forgot, but I remember everything. Page by page, I recorded it all. Not like a diary, more like a case file, because that's what it was. The date they brought me here. The words they used. The way they spoke over me, as if I wasn't in the room. I wrote about the documents, how they rushed me, how the notary barely glanced at me, how my son's hand shook when I asked to read the final page. He told me it was just paperwork. "You don't need to worry, Dad." But I did, and I do. I noted the withdrawals. Large sums. Gone. Moved. Transferred. I didn't need a bank app to notice. The letters came in, and I read them before anyone could help me open them. They didn't think I could read anymore. They were wrong. I logged every visit, every missed call, every birthday skipped. I wrote about the time my son brought me cake but took back the leftovers, like he couldn't leave even a crumb behind. I wrote about how my granddaughter used to braid my hair when she was 4, but now at 16, she doesn't look me in the eyes anymore. And on the pages in red ink, I wrote their names. Full, dates, times. The lawyer who helped them push the paperwork through. The real estate agent who listed my home before I even left it. The neighbor who whispered, "Isn't it better this way?" When she saw me for the last time in my front yard, they all thought they were doing something quiet, something tidy, something legal. But I remember, and I wrote it all down. There's a hidden flap in the back of the notebook. Inside it, I keep a single photograph. The last one of my wife and I, standing in front of our garden, smiling with our hands covered in soil, the house in the background, our house. Now sold, now gone. They say I'm too old to understand, too senile to fight. But what they don't know is that I'm not planning to fight back with fists. I'm going to fight back with words. With names, with dates, with proof. Every nurse here thinks I'm sweet, quiet, docile. And I am on the outside. But inside, I am rage wrapped in patience. I am justice counting the days. One day soon, they will come to take the last of my dignity. And on that day, the notebook will be waiting. Not just for me, but for someone who still listens. Because if they thought silence meant surrender, they never truly knew the man they left behind. End of part 2. In part 3, Whispers from Room 6. Guess what? I'm not the only one who remembers. There are others, and one of them just slipped a note under my door. It said, I believe you. Whispers from Room 6, it came as a whisper. Not from the nurses, not from the doctors, not from the people who walk these halls pretending not to see. It came from under my door, folded in half, carefully slipped in during the night. I almost missed it, but I saw the corner sticking out, barely touching the sunlight crawling across the floor. I picked it up, unfolded it. There were only 3 words. I believe you. No name, no handwriting I recognized, just those words. Simple, quiet, but louder than anything I'd heard in months. I held the note in my hand for minutes, felt its weight. Not in paper, but in meaning. Someone else knew. Someone else remembered. Someone else was still here. I thought about Room 6. Mrs. Halford, 84. White hair pulled into a bun. She wears blue sweaters every day, even in summer. The nurses think she's harmless, sweet, dull. They call her darling and pet. They speak to her like a child. But I've seen her eyes. And her eyes do not forget. She used to be a school teacher. Ran her own classroom for 36 years. Taught generations of kids in this very town. And now she sits in silence, cutting the corners off her toast like she's tracing memories. I waited until lunch. Wheelchairs lined up in the hallway. Trays rattling, conversation low and mumbled. I caught her gaze as we passed. Just a glance, but she nodded. Once, barely, but enough. That night, I waited until the hall lights dimmed. I shuffled out of bed, took my notebook with me. Quiet, careful. Room 6's door was cracked open. I knocked softly. No answer. So I pushed gently. She was sitting by the window, hands folded in her lap. She didn't turn around. I got your note, I said. She didn't speak, but she patted the chair next to her. I sat. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full. Of everything we weren't allowed to say out loud. Finally, she whispered, They did the same to me. I nodded. Your son? She shook her head. My daughter. Took my home. Said I was dangerous, had me signed over before I even knew what was happening. Her voice trembled, not from age, but from restraint. I tried to fight, but they had papers, doctors, lawyers. I had memory, and no one believed memory. I reached for my notebook, opened to the pages with names, dates, copies. Her eyes lit up. You wrote it down? I nodded. All of it. We sat there for hours, sharing, comparing. She had a notebook too. Smaller, older, but filled with the same kind of truth. And that's when I realized there are more of us. People they've silenced, isolated, tucked away in quiet rooms behind smiling staff in white coats. But we are still thinking, still remembering, still waiting, Mrs. Halford said softly before I left. They took everything, but not my mind, and not my dignity. We still have that, and we're going to use it. That night, I added a new page to my notebook. At the top, I wrote, Operation Memory, because if they thought we were senile, they never imagined we'd organize. Operation Memory begins. It began with a map, drawn on the back of a paper napkin from the dining room. Mrs. Halford brought it to our next meeting, folded 3 times, hidden in the sleeve of her cardigan. She smiled like a child passing notes under a desk. This is how we'll start. The napkin showed every hallway, every staff rotation, every room where someone lived quietly, but remembered everything. She had circled 6 rooms in red. These are the ones like us, she whispered. Still sharp, still silent, but watching. There was Mr. Alton in room 3, a former judge. He speaks to no one, but he watches everyone. There was Miss Jenkins in room 12, used to work for the state. Her own niece tricked her into signing power of attorney while she was recovering from surgery. There was even quiet Mr. Emerson in room 9. They say he hasn't spoken in over a year, but he leaves chess pieces arranged in patterns. Code. We called ourselves the Rememberers. Not out loud, only in whispers. Operation Memory wasn't a revolution. Not in the way people think of protests. It was resistance through remembrance. A quiet movement of minds they thought had rusted. We began passing messages in code. Under trays, tucked into crossword puzzles, folded in tissue boxes passed between rooms. One nurse, Lucy, noticed nothing. But Nurse Travis, he was too sharp, too observant. So we made sure the messages never lasted more than an hour. Each one written, memorized, then burned, carefully in the old heater in the utility room. We began cataloging stories. Mr. Alton had dates, Miss Jenkins had names, Mrs. Halford had addresses, I had documents. Our notebooks became chapters of one story, the story they tried to erase. We weren't trying to escape, we weren't trying to reclaim the past. We were trying to build a record, one that could outlive us, outlive them, a testament to the fact that we were never gone. Just put aside. We had one goal, to be heard one last time, clearly. On the first day of winter, we placed a folded envelope beneath the typewriter in the staff office. No name, no signature, just a title. Operation Memory, a statement from the forgotten. Inside were fragments from every notebook, every story, every betrayal. We knew someone would find it. We didn't expect what came next. Nurse Lucy read it, every word. And 2 days later, she slipped something under my door. It was her own story, her mother, her guilt, her silence. I believe you too, it ended. The ripple had begun. And suddenly, we weren't invisible anymore. The day the doors didn't lock. It was past midnight. The building was silent, except for the occasional humming of machines and the slow, rhythmic creak of an old radiator. The hallway lights were dimmed, as they always were after 10 p.m. And the staff? They were changing shifts. Everything felt routine, until I heard it. A click. Not sharp, not loud, but different. I opened one eye, listened again, held my breath. Nothing. And then, another click. This one followed by the soft creak of hinges, the east hallway door open. That door had always locked at 9 o'clock p.m. sharp. A rule, they said, for our safety. But tonight, it stayed open. I sat up slowly. My bones complained, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I slipped on my robe, tucked my notebook under my arm, moved quietly to the hallway. Outside, the silence felt different, not heavy, alive. Room 6's door creaked open just enough. Mrs. Halford's eyes met mine. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She'd heard it too. And then came a whisper from the darkened hallway. Mr. Lawrence? I turned. It was Lucy, her voice barely audible, her white shoes stepping carefully across the linoleum. She wasn't carrying a clipboard, no meds, no duty list, just a small brown envelope clutched tightly in both hands. I read it all, she said. Everything you wrote. What they did to you, to the others, I didn't know how much. Her voice cracked. I didn't know how much they were getting away with. I nodded. Not with judgment, but understanding. Because even silence comes from fear. She handed me the envelope. Inside copies. Bank records, legal documents, proof she'd dug into the files. I've been working here for almost 3 years, she whispered. I always thought the residents were just sad. But now I know. You've been silenced. All of you. I looked down at the documents. There it was, the power of attorney form they'd forged in my name. The bank letters showing money moved from my account into my son's. Dates, times, stamp marks. Everything I'd suspected, now in ink. Lucy looked nervous. I'm risking my job giving you this. But you deserve to be heard. You all do. She turned, took a deep breath, and added, the hallway door won't lock tonight, just in case you want to talk to the others. Then she walked away. And for the first time in a long time, the hallway didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a path. I visited each door that night. Room 3, room 12, room 9. Knocked once, said only, they're listening now. By sunrise, 5 of us had met in the utility room. No rebellion, no shouting. Just words, stories, notebooks opened, proof compared. And something else, hope. At 6 a.m., the hallway lights flicked back on. The door creaked again. This time, it'll lock, but we weren't afraid anymore. Because now we weren't trapped. We were preparing. The day we became witnesses, we never planned to be a movement. Not at our age, not from hospital beds and wheelchairs and memory wards. But when you've been ignored long enough, silence begins to feel like betrayal. And so we chose to speak. Lucy helped us organize. Quietly. After shifts. Behind closed doors, she brought a small voice recorder from her car. Wrapped in a scarf, hidden in her tote bag. She placed it in the center of the table in the utility room. Say it in your own words, she whispered. Whatever you remember, I'll make sure it's heard. We took turns. No scripts, no pressure, just truth. Mr. Alton went first. His voice low, deliberate. My nephew told the bank I was no longer mentally sound. Brought in a fake evaluation. Cleaned out my account in under 2 weeks. The lawyer never even met me. He paused, his hand trembled slightly. Then he added, I was a judge for 30 years. I sent men to prison for less than what he did. Miss Jenkins followed. Her eyes welled up. I trusted my niece. She said she was helping me sign up for insurance. I signed over everything. I was gone from my home in less than a month. She took a breath. I still have the original document. I've kept it hidden in a book about wildflowers because she never cared enough to open it. Mrs. Halford was last that night, and her words hit the hardest. My daughter told people I was dangerous, that I couldn't be trusted. She said I forgot her name. She looked up, eyes sharp. But I didn't forget. I just stopped calling out because no one ever answered. And then it was my turn. I spoke of the house, the will, the money moved without consent, the signatures forged, the birthdays missed, the candle I blew out alone on the day my son handed me over like a box to be stored. Lucy listened, and when we were done, she looked at us with eyes that had changed. "You're not just residents," she said. "You're witnesses. And I think it's time people knew what was done to you." The next day, she came back with a USB labeled Operation Memory Unredacted. "I have a friend," she said. "She's a reporter, independent, the kind that still listens. If I send this to her, she'll tell your story." We all agreed. Even Mr. Emerson, who hadn't spoken in months, tapped his hand 3 times on the table. Yes, yes, yes. That night, Lucy slipped the USB into her coat pocket. She hugged Mrs. Halford gently, then turned to me. "If this works," she said, "people are going to know. They're going to see you." I nodded. Let them. We didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, but from anticipation. Because for the first time, we weren't just survivors. We were witnesses. And truth, once spoken, has a way of echoing beyond locked doors. When the silence was broken. It happened 3 days after Lucy sent the file. No announcement, no warning. Just a vibration, a shift, like something old and heavy had finally cracked. She walked in with her phone clutched tightly, eyes wide, voice shaking. "It's out," she whispered. "It's published. Right now, front page of the site." She handed me the phone. The headline read, "Forgotten but not silent. Voices from inside the walls of elder care." And beneath it, our stories, our names, our words. And for the first time, the world beyond these walls knew we were still here. The piece wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, respectful, but direct. It detailed the forged documents, the financial theft, the isolation tactics. Each name changed for privacy, but the facts were loud enough. And at the very end, a simple line. They were called Senile, but they remembered everything. That afternoon, a lawyer showed up. Not for us, for the facility. She wore black heels and a sharp gray coat, and she didn't ask to speak to a doctor. She asked for the director. Lucy told us her name later. Ms. Bennett, an elder rights attorney. She used to know my wife, back when they volunteered together at the town library. And when she read my story, she said, "That man was never senile. He was silenced." The next day, reporters started calling. The administration panicked. We weren't told anything, but we saw it. The rushed meetings, the whispering in hallways, the way they suddenly started calling us Mr. and Mrs. again. That night, Lucy came to my room. She sat on the edge of the bed, barely able to smile. "There's going to be an investigation." She paused. "Your son, he tried to deny everything. But the bank records and audio made it impossible. And the journalist found more. Other families. Other victims." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I was shocked, but because I had waited so long to be seen without having to scream. Mrs. Halford cried when she heard. Not loudly, just quiet tears down her cheek as she whispered, "I thought I'd die invisible." Mr. Alton asked for his suit, the one he hadn't worn in years. He sat in his wheelchair by the window that afternoon with his tie perfectly tied and said, "If they come asking questions, I want to look like the man they forgot I was." The staff treaded more carefully. They spoke slower, used our names more often. The word dementia stopped showing up on our charts, at least not without second opinions. They still tried to be gentle. But the condescension was finally cracking. And then something unexpected happened. I received a letter. No return address, just my name handwritten. I opened it with trembling hands. It was from my granddaughter, the one who used to braid my hair when she was 4. Inside, "Grandpa, I read the article. I'm sorry, I didn't know what they did. I want to visit. I miss you. I remember you. Love, Ellie." I read the letter 5 times. Then I folded it gently and placed it inside my notebook. Not as evidence, but as proof that when you finally speak, even those you thought were lost can still find their way back. The final entry. I always thought my story would end in silence. A quiet death, a closed door, a name on a marble plaque, misspelled maybe, forgotten eventually, but it didn't. It ended here, with ink and breath. And the sound of someone knocking on my door, because they wanted to come in, Not because they had to. Ellie came to visit last Sunday. She brought coffee. Real coffee, not the watered down nonsense they serve in the cafeteria. She said she'd driven 3 hours just to see me. When she stepped into the room, she looked at me like she wasn't sure what to say. So I said it first. I never forgot you. She started to cry. We talked for an hour, then two, then three. She told me she had always wondered why I disappeared so fast. Why no one spoke of me at home. Why my name only came up when it was convenient. And I told her everything. Gently, truthfully. Not to make her carry the guilt, but to help her understand the weight I'd been forced to hold alone. She listened, really listened. Not like the nurses, not like my son used to. Eyes half scrolling through his phone. She looked at me like I was real again. Before she left, she asked, "Can I read your notebook?" I hesitated, then handed it over. She held it like something sacred, like it carried the pulse of a man who had never been as invisible as the world made him feel. That night, I opened a new page. The last one. The paper was worn now, edges soft from months of thumbing. Ink had bled in spots where my hands had trembled. But this page felt different, lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had finally shared it. And I wrote, "This is the final entry. Not because I've run out of memories, but because someone else will carry them now." I didn't write this to be pitied or avenged. I wrote it so the truth wouldn't die with me. So that one day someone might say, "He was here, he remembered, he mattered." And if that's all I leave behind, it's enough. 2 days later, I gave the notebook to Ellie, not to protect it, but to set it free. "What will you do with it?" I asked. She smiled. "I'll tell your story." Then she paused. "And not just yours. Because there are others here still writing in silence, still waiting, still hoping someone sees them. And now someone does. The walls haven't changed. The clocks still tick too slow. But the silence? It's broken. And in its place, there's a hum, a whisper, a heartbeat of people who were never senile, just waiting to be remembered. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.